Hello everyone and welcome. So in this video we're going to be building this donut from scratch, mostly using cups. This is based on a tutorial by Daniel Tiger on the NVIDIA Studio channel on YouTube. And we're not going to be following step by step that tutorial. There will be a few shortcuts and we will just create the basic setup. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, let's start by dropping a geometry container and a cup network. And the first thing we're going to do is to build our donut shape and our UVs. So let's create a sub import, drop down a torus, and we will set 32 by 64 to have the squared out. Now we're going to UV, so for that I'm gonna create I'm gonna select here the seams. So I'm gonna select this one and this one in the middle. So click on an edge, Shift A, and it will select the loop. So let's press tab and group, and let's call it seams. And from there we can just UV flatten this. And this won't look much. We need to select the seams and disable manual layout. Let's see how they look. So we want to rectify. We won't have perfect UVs, but it will be close enough. So now we need to stretch these UVs so they fill the entire UV area, UV tile. So I'm not aware of any tool in Houdini that does that by default, so I'm gonna just create a wrangle, and this will be really simple. We will just create unwrap the geo, so geo unwrap, so we can get the bounds. And we need this to be on the vertices, so make sure we have everything. And let's create a variable for our bounding box max. So get bounding box max geo, and now we just need to assign that to the UVs. So set in the X we won't do anything, and on the Z will be 0, and on the Y we will just stretch it. So we will start with the initial value, so uv.y, and here we need uv.x, and we will divide it by the bounding box max dot y. So this should do the trick. Oh, x, and let's see, it did stretch the UVs, and as you can see, it's also upside down. So what we might do is to negate this and do the same for this one, but now they are out of the first tile. So what we can do is to add one in the X and add one in the Y, or in the V, U and V. So a bit of a stretch in here, but hopefully you learned something new with this setup. So now let's create some basic deformation with a mountain, and I'm gonna displace it just 0.02. I'm gonna follow some values, but feel free to To use your own setup, I encourage you to create your own setup. And I'm gonna just really hard code them. And as you can see, we have some deformation. So now let's create an output node, which is always advisable, otherwise we might have the display flag on another node, and this way it will always evaluate the last node. So let's place a subdivide. Let's see our UVs. Let's place a subdivide. For now, let's keep it at 3, and maybe we can increase it later. And let's also place a normal, and that's our setup done. So let's start now by creating a fractal noise. We will create first the icing mask. So I'm gonna create a fractal noise and change the element size to 0.0479, just a number I have, and I'm gonna stretch it so we can have those drips of the icing. So about 4, and we can, I'm not sure why this offset doesn't really work, so for that I'm gonna create check 3D noise, antique animate, and offset it, so you can offset it in here. And I might reduce the lacunarity and also the roughness, so something like this. Then I'm gonna blur it, and you will see in a bit where we're going with this. If you watch that Daniel Tiger tutorial, you will be very aware of what we're doing. So I'm gonna blur it just a little bit and create a ramp, set it to vertical, and let me see, I'm gonna change the position of the ramp, so something like this. And now I'm gonna blend it, so blend these two, oops, and I'm gonna change it to overlay. So we're starting to create that dripping pattern. So now we need to tighten this mask. So for that I'm going to use a remap. And I'm going to change these values. Something like this. I'm not gonna follow exactly, so this will be fine. And from here we can actually make this even sharper, so with the quantize, sorry, and change the segments to 2, so we get a sharper mask. So a new node that we haven't talked about before. And what else? Now we can start to, let's preview this in our mesh. So preview material, create a geometry, and place, for now let's place it in the base color. So we get something like this, and we might end up changing this. So we need to create some extra drips, and for that I'm going to organize this, and after the blend I'm gonna create a remap, and we're going to change this to hill, maybe tighten a bit the mask, so a bit more maybe, and we will create a tile pattern. So let's create a tile pattern, and we will change the divisions to 18, change this to compound and egg, which is the closest I found to the draping shape. And let's change the radius, and we will create some jittering, so about 0.4, and play with the seeds. And we want to play with the size too, so let's change this to varying and the variation to about 0.3 on the size, and we will change this vertical scale to 2.7, so we have these elongated shapes, and maybe play with the seeds. So in my example I had to 31. And I believe that's all. So now we will use this map as a mask, as you can see, and we can create a streak blur to elongate it even more, and maybe change the angle to 90, and the rest is fine. And we can create some distortion also. Let's move these two out of the way and create a distort and a fractal noise. Change this to UV and center to 0, so we have both positive and negative values. So let's change the scale to 1, and we will play with the size of the noise and with the amplitude. So size wise we can set it to 0.05 and the amplitude really small, 0.062. So we have something like this. Maybe you can play with the offset. Now here the offset works for some reason. Maybe we decrease the roughness to 0.1, something like this. And now we can again quantize and change the segments to 2. So we have a very sharp mask. So now we will blend this with the original mask. So gonna grab this one and this one and set it in this case to max, and we need to transform them down. So let's move them down. And I'm gonna move it by 0.05. Now of course this doesn't line up with my initial setup. Let me see what I've done different in here. Let me check. Well, we can move on because we will actually create some masks after this. So for now let's leave it like that. And we will equalize let's make sure. Let's equalize also here. So let's remove this one. Let's see. Where is this? Maybe we need to play here with the remap. Nope. Let's see. We want floor. Still we get this issue. Let me just reset, see if that's something I'm missing. Maybe change this to multiply or add. So we will actually remove this quantize from here and from here, and we can do it afterwards. So something like this. It's different from my initial setup. I'm not sure what's going on, but this seems to work out well. Let's preview this. So we're blending. What's going on in here? Let me reset the viewport and unplug and plug again. So now it's working. So we will need to work a bit more on this mask. So now we will create some edge detect, and the default one will be fine. And let's change the details to 0.5 and blur a bit, 0.185, something like this. And we don't want this to repeat, so let's create a layer properties and change this to clamp. I believe I changed it to clamp, yes. And now let's blend with the initial setup. We're just trying to round out these initial shapes. So we will blend it as dodge. So as you can see, the effect it has. And I'm gonna totally change. Let me check. So we need actually to move this. Just change the radius. And maybe move this a bit more down. Oh, I know what is happening. In my initial setup, I am actually blasting a few. So I am pruning, yes, I'm pruning a few shapes. So you can remove a few, something like this. Now it's looking better. We will move this in a bit. So for now, let's continue with this one. And I might want to move this down a bit. So that's our main issue. And let's see, let's move also this down. And maybe reduce the radius. And increase the repetitions. And we need to move this again up. So 0.05. So something like this. Let's see. There's a lot of tweaking. Maybe we don't move it so much. And less pruning. Let's continue with this for now, so we don't get stuck in here. So now I want to create the effect on the inside. So for that I'm gonna first create a mask. So with a ramp I'm gonna change it to vertical and change this to constant, and I'm going to mask the top part. So create a constant, set it to black, and create this mask. So something like this. I'm gonna create a transform 2D to mirror this part in here. And I'm going to rotate this 180 and move this by minus 0.8 so it will wrap around. And then I'm gonna blend with the mode set to maximum. So something like this. And let's check the result. As you can see, it's creating that interior detail. Again, due to the UVs, this will repeat a bit more on the inside because the UVs are stretching in a way. So there's no perfect way of unwrapping a donut or a sphere, as far as I know. This is the best approach, I believe. So I'm still thinking about this. Maybe, let me see. Maybe we can increase the size. So something like this. Let's see. It's okay, but instead of increasing the size, let's decrease it and increase the streak blur. Let's see. For somehow some reason is not updating. Let me check if I disable. Now is the quantize, so we might quantize here and set it to 2. And let's see. Let's increase again this. And I'm not sure this is updating, so I'm gonna just remove. And this should be working now. Looks like I'm having some issues, as this is not updating properly. So let me again reconnect this. Let's keep this for now. And we have done the flipping. Now let's maybe work on some colors. So let's create, let's do that in the next part. So let's tweak this a little bit. So starting with this. And let's maybe move this a bit more down. And let's change this remap. Let's maybe do this, increase the tile pattern, and let's say we like this for now. So let's create some color. So I'm gonna start with a fractal noise. And I'm gonna change this. This can stay at 0.1. I'm gonna reduce the octaves and increase a bit the roughness. And this will be fine. Now let's duplicate it and let's change the element size to a very low number. So we will decrease the octaves and increase the roughness to 0.9, so something like this. Now we will blend it. And change it to multiply, and maybe reduce the opacity, and I'll create a mono to RGB. And I'm gonna create here some colors that I have from before. So I'm gonna drag this to about here and this one to here to create some contrast, and load in the other color. This will be the donut base. Now let's create a blend, and this will be our background, and create a constant, and our constant will be our chocolate. can change it to RGB. And as a mask, we will use a blurred version. So let's just reduce it a little bit and connect it in here. And this will be our base color. So it doesn't look that bad, right? We just need to tweak it a little bit. So let's blur it a bit more for the height. So 0.009 and connect it to the height. And this will be way too much. And we will change it by 0.02. So something like this. Next we can increase the resolution of the mesh and the texturing, but for now let's keep it this way. So we can start to create the details. So the sprinkles, let me see, yeah, we can do that. So let's create an SDF shape, and we have one here that will be really good for this, which is the line, and we add thickness, and the length, let's change it to 0.98. And create mono, SDF to mono. And now we can create a tile pattern and connect this to the stamp. And we can just increase maybe the divisions. Change this uniform jitter, maybe not so much, and change the offset, the seed, and rotate this by 180 and set it to varying, or just set this one to 0 and increase the rotation variation. And now we can play with offset, and since they are overlapping a bit, we can change this to weather bound and change again to 20. This will be a bit better, not perfect, but maybe we can decrease the jittering. And now let's connect which one? This mask from the height to the point mask, and let's have some more space, and we will blur this a bit since we're going to connect this to the height, so not too much, maybe the default settings will be fine. Create a multiply constant so we can decrease the height, and let's set it over the base height. So I'm gonna decrease the height, brightness to 0.6, so just decrease a bit the height. And we can create a null, name this height. So this is starting to look like something. Now we will create the colors. So for that I'm gonna pick this one and create a RGB. RGB random RGB. That's what I want, and connect the ID to the seed. And I believe I used black body. And I'm gonna multiply it so I get rid of the yellow color on the background. I'm gonna multiply this by the tiles. So something like this. Now we can add it to the color. So create an add. So this will be just fine. And let's check the results. So starting to look like the final results. Now I'm gonna actually increase the resolution to 2K. Hopefully it's updated, and also increase the subdivisions to 4, so we start to see a bit better our results. So as you can see, some of the shapes are bleeding out, so we can just maybe use this one as a mask. And we need to use the same for the height. So when we do the add, we need to use this as a mask too. Let's see if I can use this one. No, it's better to use the color one, yes. So alright, let's now work a bit on the normal. So I'm gonna start with this texture in here and create RGB to mono. And height to normal. And I'm gonna decrease to 0.25. Create a fractal noise. And I'm gonna decrease the element size to 0.02 and change this to 1.12. This should be fine. Create another height to normal. This will be for our chocolate. And for this one, we actually want a value of 0.6. Now we can blend this. Oops, this one in here, and we will use as a mask this one. Now we can connect this to the normal. And of course we need to decrease it quite a bit, so 0.03. So we have some displacement, some normal mapping. So now we can finally work on the roughness map, so let's create a remap. A remap will be just fine. And oops, and let's change this output mean to 0.5 and the chocolates to be, so the chocolate will be slightly shinier, so about 0.3. This will be fine. Let's connect it to the roughness. This is a very simple roughness map. And this is basically our final result. Let me maybe we can, again guys, this outer draping shapes is not the best, as I tried to change it a bit, but I'm not gonna bother. So I'm just going to risk something in here, change this to 5, and let's see if this works. And it does, and as you can see we have a finer details with a very high resolution mesh. Then again, you can import this to Solaris and render with Karma, but I'm gonna leave it here. And feel free to tweak the final result. It's a bit random, but that's what we got today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.